Welcome to this week's episode of Chatting the Pictures. So we've gone viral, Michael, this week, haven't we? We have 3 images that have certainly had multiple lives of their own already. Our first viral image is in the segment we call The Look. And here we're interested in especially exploring photographs that push the visual boundaries to illuminate a story or idea.
The photo was taken by wedding photographer Karna Roa. It shows Katie and Curtis Ferland at their wedding in Sonoma County. For background, the Kincade fire has at this point burned 76,000 acres, 94 structures, and it's now been 60% contained. I just have to say, if I hear one more person use that term, the new normal, I think I'm going to scream.
Yeah, how about I'll throw off a different cliche to you, and that is this photo gives a new name to the idea of a destination wedding. Sometimes we talk about viral photos as if they go viral because they're insignificant. But this photo went viral for a really significant reason, which is that it perfectly captures this combination of fantasy and reality. So everyone wants the perfect wedding. You make a plan. This particular couple happens to be from Chicago, so they and their friends hauled out to Sonoma, surely well planned within an inch of its life, as all good weddings should be. And yet you have the reality.
We talk a lot here about how different categories of photography seem to be merging together. And the term, I think it's now an acceptable term, is wedding photojournalism. So if this doesn't fit that bill, I don't know what does.
The fact that this couple collaborating with the photographer recognized that, to me, is really compelling. And it actually points to the broader public recognition of the impacts of climate change. I have no idea about the climate politics of this couple, and I certainly don't want to ascribe any political orientation to them. But to me, this photo is this acknowledgement that we live in a time where these kinds of events are a part of the landscape, and literally the landscape, and you can't necessarily ignore it or Photoshop it away. So you might do what they did.
I think people find it also pretty funny. So I think that in that humor, we also see, a lot of denial. And in terms of the mask, by the way, it's an N95 mask by 3M. I've got one sitting right in front of me because I've had several occasions to wear it this week, and also wore one for 2 to 3 weeks last November when we had endured the same catastrophe. And amusement, you take your amusement with your grain of salt these days, I guess, given your proximity to the particular crisis and location.
The wedding photographer who made this photo said that it reminded her a little bit of Grant Wood's American Gothic. It kind of plays out in a couple of ways. First, I always like to point out that the couple in American Gothic are not, in fact, actually husband and wife. They are models for the painting. This image was ridiculed as sort of joking when it first emerged after Wood painted it in 1930. And he said, no, I actually mean it to be an earnest representation. And over time, it's come to represent, kind of the Midwestern fortitude of people surviving the Great Depression. So I was thinking about that comparison to this image, and certainly their body posture, the seriousness with which they're holding their bodies, somewhat awkwardly, that, to a certain extent could be argued to invoke a similar kind of fortitude. So I don't read this image as mocking the situation so much as a kind of making do, perhaps, and a pointed making do in the sense of, again, that clash between the fantasy and the reality. Our next segment we call The News, and here we're interested in how news photos tell a story and how do we understand the information in a news photo.
This photograph was taken by Sam Brodey. He's not a photographer. He covers Congress for the Daily Beast. The photo shows House Republicans after they marched into the secure conference room in the Capitol and disrupted a session of the House impeachment inquiry. One thing this photograph allows me to do is to point out how we Westerners not only read from left to right, but also from top to bottom.
There's a lot happening in this image, and I think the gender politics are playing out very clearly. I think not only to the extent that you have a group of what appears to be primarily white men walking slowly into the committee room is actually what happened, but they are proclaiming some kind of victory of having stormed. And then you've got these 4 other figures on the stairs who are, for the most part, going about their business. The young man, and then you have 3 women, 2 of whom are paying absolutely no attention to what's going on. And the other one who literally seems to be dreaming of or for a better world.
Also, talking about gender, I believe there was at least 2 congresswomen in that group, but there might have been one. And it's funny, too, just in terms of composition. I think I just noticed it. Bottom left, that one head, may have been one of the congresswomen, but certainly in this picture, we don't see any.
The bars on the stairs are also attracting me here, and I'm not exactly sure what to make of that in light of the political context, but there just seems to be a kind of weight of something pressing down on this group. You've got this big group. It's almost like you could imagine if that stairwell were to suddenly become movable and descend upon them, they would be crushed. I don't know how far you want to stretch the political analogy here, but there was a series of arguments that played out immediately following this event that said, okay, now they're getting desperate. They're trying to create a spectacle to distract us from the very important, serious things that people are testifying to in this inquiry. So part of me reads this image as the top doesn't know what the bottom is doing or cares, but part of me also reads it as they're about to get squished.
Yeah, the fact that you've got the woman in blue, that was the hashtag, looking to the sky, and that light is really the sense of a divine light. So what you have then is this accidental picture that prompts us to consider our broken system and this polarized Congress and the hate mongering that's going on in more existential and even spiritual terms. It's really, the photograph literally is looking for a higher meaning to this morass we're in.
Again, that disconnect between what's happening down below, which seems to be getting all the attention of the microphones, and the fact that things are going on above that. In a broader kind of pragmatic political sense, it could also suggest that who's really paying attention to this spectacle and what are the things that people would prefer to pay attention to instead. Our final segment is called The Pick. And here we're especially interested in what photos get public traction.
This is a Trump tweet using an image, a Photoshop from the Daily Wire. As we know, or if you follow Trump on social media, Trump is very dialed in the far-right meme machine, and especially things you see on YouTube. In almost every case, when he does retweet these kinds of things, he's looking both to distract and I also think to humanize himself.
A number of news stories have pointed out that the photo, which features the dog, who as of today has now been named as Conan, who participated in the al-Baghdadi raid over the weekend. That photo of the dog was mashed up with an image of Trump giving an actual Medal of Honor to a real-life Vietnam veteran, a guy named James McClellan, in 2017. The other thing is that the dog gives him optics regarding the raid that he can't really have in other ways. So it's my understanding that, like with the bin Laden raid during the Obama administration, the actual members of the human military who performed this raid will not be trotted out on a stage and named. And so Trump's got a problem. And his visual problem is that he needs to put himself in a position to get credit for this taking down this terrorist. So they tried it with the questionable Situation Room photograph, which immediately was criticized, and some people argued it was staged, and that didn't seem to get a lot of positive traction for him. So the dog is becoming Trump's way to keep himself visible. So it's not enough just to tweet out the dog. You have to tweet out a picture of you with the dog. And then presumably next week, we will see other pictures of Trump with the actual dog.
The Syrian intervention on the part of Turkey was such a disaster, such an epic disaster. But we're not looking at these photographs of ISIS prisoners who, may or may not be escaping. We're not looking at a diaspora of Kurds who've been living in Syria who are now fleeing that buffer zone. We're not talking about any of that. And maybe I'm still hung up on the metaphors, but I'm thinking about kind of Wag the Dog and how now this photograph is spawning more photographs. And then the guy doesn't like animals. He's one of the few presidents not to have a dog. The fact he called Baghdadi a dog, died like a dog. And then last thing, it's a Belgian breed. And so here again, it kind of then associates us back to the immigration policy and how there was a net zero number of immigrants that came into the country this last year.
And that raises the question of what do we do and think about viral images? So when the images like the ones we've been talking about today, quote unquote, go viral, What is that visibility in service of? I mean, those are all really important questions. And this dog is not going to go away. And that's just how it's going to get played out. And so the question is, what else are we going to look at or pay attention to? Or as you point out, what are we not paying attention to? Because we're all looking at dogs. And you know what? Trump is right about one thing. It's like, except for Donald Trump, really, who doesn't like dogs? The one thing I would predict is that once the impeachment inquiry hits its public phase, we're going to be seeing very different images. And these sorts of images are no longer going to be, at the top of everybody's feeds. Thanks, everybody, for being with us for this episode. And Michael, do you want to tell everyone where you can find the site?
Instagram, Reading the Pictures. On Twitter, Reading the Pics. And on our website, readingthepictures.org.
Thanks.